Hey, I'm Sam Pressler.
And I'm PJ Walsh. Welcome to In Stitches, the podcast that explores humanity and humor.
PJ, who do we have on this week?
And this is a good one. It's my good buddy, Matt Iseman. You might recognize him as the host of American Ninja Warrior. But what's beautiful about this episode and what we love to do here is we get off stage. We get the struggles that he had when the camera wasn't rolling. And Matt has had some substantial health struggles that just is fascinating to talk about. So I'm excited for everyone to hear his story.
Yeah, this is really engaging conversation with a guy who has a very public personality, and we get to have a bit more of a personal conversation with him. Before we go into it, I just want to make a quick note. We recorded this conversation a little over a month ago. So we were still at that point in the height of lockdown, and it was prior to the murder of George Floyd and the preceding uprisings and national conversations around race. So I just want y'all to keep that in the back of mind as we go into this interview. But without further ado, really excited for this conversation with Matt Iseman. All right, Matt Iseman, welcome to In Stitches.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, PJ.
Matt Iseman.
Once he does that, I start talking like PJ talking like me.
Because the thing I'll say is, this is how long we've been friends, Sam, is Matt and I met 20 years ago, and whenever we answered our phone, we go into the voice of the bits that we used to do.
Officer Walsh, PJ Walsh.
Dr. Iseman! Dr. Iseman's son!
That's awesome. So, as PJ said, you are a doctor, or you?
Yes.
Or you? Is it once
I
a doctor?
technically still am. Yeah, I mean, it's
like the Marine Corps. It's like once,
right.
You know.
Well, not as dramatic as that. It's not as though I have a killer instinct. It's just I have a degree on the wall that says MD, so technically I'm a doctor.
That's so. I'm interested.
I would probably be as lethal as a Marine right now, though, if I were practicing medicine. So best I have retired.
It's enough time that goes. It's like a Marine. It's like too much time to put the rifle in his hand.
That's it.
If you're the person showing up at the ICU, we got bigger problems going on.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
So, what initially led you to want to be a doctor?
I decided to start pursuing medicine midway through college, and I think the honest thing that really spurred it was my brother. He's 2 years older than me. He graduated from college and he didn't know what he was going to do with his life. And so he ended up moving out to Jackson Hole and getting a job as a construction worker and skiing. And I thought, I thought college was kind of the end. I thought you get into college and life just unfolds. I didn't realize, no, college is just the beginning. You got to figure out what you're going to do, which is kind of an obvious and embarrassing epiphany that I had. So I really started kind of questioning what do I want to do? What appeals to me? And at that point, I'd taken some sciences, and I was very good in the sciences. I loved people. I loved being around people. I knew that. I loved interacting with people, making them feel better. And I think the biggest influence was probably my dad. My dad is a doctor and a world-renowned physician, traveled the world, an expert in tuberculosis. And he never once pressured me into medicine. He never said, follow in my footsteps, become a doctor. He never said that. But I think my dad was such a big figure, as you know, for most kids. I think your dad's your hero. And I saw how much satisfaction he got from his job and how much it meant to him and how much his patients, how much he influenced their lives. And so I thought, all right, I like science. I want to help people. And I see how much my dad loves being a doctor and what a difference you can make in people's lives. So it was obvious. Like it was the perfect job for me on paper. And so then I just started moving towards that goal. And then it became kind of in the way I think that college, where I've realized something about myself where I love to have a challenge. I love a goal. Mm-hmm. And usually those goals have come in the form of kind of outside of me, where it was either through school, through being challenged by teachers or sports, through coaches. And so all of a sudden now I had another goal that I realized when I just put my head down and grind, I feel like that's when life was easiest for me.
Mm.
And so I had that new focus now, and a focus, and selfishly, if I admit it, the other thing was, I remember in college, you're with all your friends. And I always felt like everybody else knew what they were doing with their lives, that they just had it figured out. And I would panic when people would say, what are you going to do? And you try to give some answer that would get people off your back, right? That would kind of make them, and when you said, I'm becoming a doctor, people respected that. And if I'm being honest, that was really appealing to me, that idea of, hey, you know what? I'm making something of myself. I'm becoming a doctor. And I like that. And I like that I don't think I've ever really said that out loud. Because it's kind of shameful. I mean, it really is. Like, my God, you're going in to help people. And yet the reason, one of the things that I did like about it at that time in college was it's something that people respect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I crave that respect. Not now. Not that I'm in entertainment.
Yeah. So what you went from what was that transition like? Your father was a doctor. You went into,
and when I tell the story, I kind of say like I make it neat, but the reality was, I think so. It built. I think I started to realize once I got into residency. So I go through medical school, and you almost don't have a chance to look up because you're constantly just trying to stay alive. It is, as hard as I've ever worked and been challenged, and you're surrounded by some of the most gifted and motivated people. And so there's a real competitive environment. And so it was just kind of survival. And then I got into training, where you really are interacting with patients, and where it's not so much what grade are you getting. It's, hey, how are you taking care of these people? And I just, it was just this feeling of, I would go into the hospital, and I remember when I would drive to the hospital when I knew I was going to be on call, which meant you're on for probably 36 hours when you go to that hospital, and you may or may not sleep, and you're not going to sleep much. And I just remember when I was driving to the hospital, I would have this pit in my stomach, like this is not where I want to be. And I remember feeling, this is a horrible feeling to have, because I'm going to go talk to people who are placing their lives in my hands. And so it was just this feeling of, I started to feel like a fraud. I started to feel like a fraud around my patients. And I'm like, I'm not helping them. And I had this sick feeling in my stomach all the time that I was not living the life I was meant to. And it's so when I had this realization, and I remember the night, it was in January, I was in the intensive care unit, which is obviously where the most critically sick patients are. And we're getting slammed. We're getting patient after patient after patient. And you always have a backstop when you're in your first year of training. And I had a student who was a year older than me. And then, of course, you have other doctors you can call, fellows up the chain. But at a certain point, it's like, hey, man, take care of your business. And so the doctor who's with me in the hospital, this second year doctor, is like, hey, we got 7 patients. You got to just start writing orders. And I'm writing these orders going, I think I know what I'm doing. And just this panic, though, if I get it wrong, someone could die. And I realized, like, hey, next year I'll be that student. I'll be that second year guy in charge of someone else, and so on. And I'm like, I just didn't feel like I could do it. And that was when I said, I have to reevaluate this, because I can't sustain this. And because either I'm going to break or someone's going to die. Either outcome is horrible. And so that's when I said, I have to do something else. And I'd done stand-up a handful of times at that point, first in New York when I was in med school, and then in Colorado during training. And so I thought, all right, if I take a break from medicine, what do I do? And I'd never really, other than a few times of stand-up, I'd always been school, sports. I'd never done anything creative. And I thought I wanted to try to do something to reset my mind, just to figure out what was going to make me happy. And so I kick around, all right, you become a ski bum, you travel the world, you become a bartender. But I thought, let me try stand-up comedy. Let me try something the opposite of what I've done, just to awaken a different part of my brain and see. And I think what I was anticipating to happen was that I would get this uncertain. I thought I'd grow up. I thought I would get it out of my system, and I would go, now you can be an adult. Now you can go back to medicine. Now you can help people. And instead, I move out to Los Angeles. I meet PJ. We're doing open mics. And you remember at the beginning, you're not playing theaters. You're not in a comedy club. You're playing in laundromats. You're playing in restaurants while people are eating and baseball games are on over your head. There's no crowd other than other comedians. It's awful. And I loved it. And as I got on stage, within a few weeks, I was like, this is what I meant to do. And it really was like just a light going on of, instead of doing what I thought I should do or what, looked good on paper, I found something that I just felt in my bones. This is what I was meant to do.
That's awesome. Well, back in those days too, because Matt, our friend Michael Batts, and I, all unknown to each other, just decided to get in our cars on the same exact day. And was it September 1st?
September 1st, 1999.
Yep. And drive out to LA. And we didn't realize that we all decided to do that. And the one thing that I knew that was apparent when I first met Matt was, up until that point, he did not work in anything creative.
He's saying my joke stunk at the beginning, Sam. They haven't gotten much better, but
no. See, the thing that I appreciated about Matt was he came at it from such a like before Google, there was Matt Iseman. That's what we used to say. Because he was so smart about everything. And I came from more of like the Navy, kind of everyone shaped me. I was like a storyteller. So the reason I think that we became such good friends, it was such different dynamics heading towards the same thing, that, because honestly, there's only so many people as you go through life that stay in your life for such a long period of time. And when you go through those trenches, when you go through the open mics, when you're sitting there and you're watching your friend eat it on stage, which both of us do, and then you get in that car and you go to Denny's and you talk it out, there's a bond that just forms.
And and PJ, I think that was the other thing too, is we had different approaches, but the thing that unified us was the passion, I think, and the way we wanted to approach it too. Even though we had these different approaches, the thing we wanted to do was, we didn't want to be out there to party. We didn't want to be out there to, we wanted to get better. We wanted to be as funny as possible. And we treated it like a job. We were doing it 6 or 7 nights a week. And we were together all the time. And when somebody would lag, someone wouldn't do it, we would pick each other up. And we said this countless times, when you're talking to people starting out, I think the 2 pieces of advice that we give are: do it, just do it. There's no substitute for doing it. And the other thing is, find people at your level with whom find your people who will share this experience with you, because it can be a soul crushing experience at times. And to have those people who have your back and can pick you up, and I think see how you do things and hold you accountable, which is, again, I think why we've been friends for over 20 years.
The thing I wanted to ask too, Matt, because I don't even think we ever visited this, is I know for myself during those days, the seed of doubt would always plant in when I'd wake up in the middle of the night. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and be like, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life? What are you doing? And then I'd put my head back on a pillow, talk to you guys, your friends push you through. Throughout that time, when was that little doubt?
So it's funny. I think there was something that, because I'd come from, so the reason I say, people go, man, you would have been a lot cheaper if you figured out before med school that you wanted to be a comedian. I'm like, yeah, it would have. But the thing I think that medicine gave me when I came out was, and I think PJ had it too from being in the military, and our friend Michael Batts had it from being a high-level college football player, was we'd all accomplish something. And I think it helped us have an identity, because the reality is, in comedy, all you're doing is searching for your voice. You're searching for your identity. But we'd already found something that we could hang our hats on at the end of the day, where even if we were bombing, even if people were like, man, you're not funny, it's like, that's okay. I know I felt that way before, and I accomplished something with hard work and determination. And I know I'm bringing that to this. So I think having been a doctor was so helpful in that, when you're bombing, when you're going out for auditions and you're eating it, that sense of, I know I've done something before. I know I don't need the validation from this, even though I crave it, because I have that validation from before.
I love that. And I think it relates to a lot of the experience that I've had working with, the veterans in the ASAP community. Is it's not about replacing your identity as a veteran with your identity as a comic.
Yeah.
It's about expanding that identity. It's being a veteran and it's being a doctor and because that's how you have a healthy relationship to the art form, to the process, to the job. And so I love that you each had that different. I'm an athlete and I'm a comic. I'm a veteran and I'm a comic. I'm a doctor and I'm a comic.
Sam, honestly, you took me back so many years there, Matt, because I remember sitting in the apartment on one Breeze, right? And
Two Breeze Avenue.
Breeze.
One was the other one across the street.
Right on Venice Boulevard. And we had that conversation of we've all had miniature careers. And it was just, there was something about that. There's something about having that accomplishment. And each of us had that. So that was.
And it's a funny thing, Sam. I think, you also realize, in comedy, you're never done, right? Your act is never done. No joke is ever done. Mm-hmm. And your quest to find that voice and to continue evolving is never done. And I think it's, obviously it's a metaphor for life. This idea of, we're always in life trying to find that, to analyze yourself. And I think now talking about mindset, talking about reflecting on yourself is much more accepted. But I know 20 years ago, I was like, nah, you're kind of the bluster, the beard. And I think as comedians, I often say being on stage was very therapeutic because you get to, in a humorous way, talk about things. And what was crazy was when you found some little thing that you might have been ashamed of, and you hear the laughter, and PJ says it's that surprise recognition where people go, oh my God, I think that too. And that sense of, I love that with comedy where, when you really dig down, when you get so specific, I like to say the more specific you get, the more universal it becomes, because people might not relate to that specific instance, but they will certainly relate to that emotion that it brings out. And that's, which is always the quest. And, that we very often fall short in our jokes. But
here's the other thing on that time period. Now, with this quest, with your dad being a surgeon, his son's a doctor. At any point, was your dad hoping you'd grow out of it?
He never, again, and I've told this story where when I told him I was leaving, he said, life is short, do what makes you happy, which is the most amazing advice I've gotten. But he's lived it, and to my face. Again, if you talk to him, he might have thought when I was doing a commercial for Athlete's Foot, he might have thought, what is my son, the doctor, doing? But I think they've always been incredibly supportive, which is important. I think, a lot of people come out here because maybe they didn't have that from the family. And I think PJ, Michael, and I all are very close to our family and had family that had supported us. And I think in various ways and levels. But my dad, I don't think ever questioned it. Part of it, I felt like he felt the golden era of medicine was kind of ending and saw more of this where the bottom line was more important than the quality of patient care. And I think he kind of had a building frustration. So I think when I left, he thought, if it isn't your passion, don't do it, because this is it's a changing job and it's going to be more of a challenge. And I think he kind of foresaw some of what has come to pass for doctors and why job satisfaction has dropped.
One of the things that I like about both of your experiences, just hearing it, and I don't think even PJ, I've known that part about your experience, is that on the outside, you could maybe perceive that you were running away from something, but you were really running towards something. You had this objective, this goal, this piece of your life that you wanted to explore. And it was like not coming from a place of deficit, but it was like grounded in this thing that was energizing and exciting to you. And I think that's like a really, that's not always how people enter into comedy and the arts.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is, you're right. I think it's a much better and reliable pull, when you have something pulling you forward, as opposed to that fear that is, driving you away. there definitely is. There are definitely times, and to kind of get back to your question though, PJ, I think I was so excited. And the word I always used to describe myself was enthusiastic. And when I got out here, I felt like the weight of the world was off. I was shot out of a cannon. I was living just this life that I never thought entertainment was an option. I never thought getting to tell jokes and do commercials was an option. So I'm leading this life where I love what I do. I'm surrounded by friends. I feel like I'm getting to play all the time. I was actually making better money than I was in medicine. And so I think even though, that it didn't necessarily happen, everything happened immediately, I was having enough success. I actually started to get much more anxious. 39 and a half years old, I just woke in the middle of the night, and it's just what you said, PJ. In the night, everything's more magnified. I remember waking up going, wait a second, I'm almost 40. I'd never thought of my age before. I'd never thought, you're old. I'd never thought of it until I'm almost 40, which means I'm almost 50, which means I'm almost dead. What am I doing? What's going to happen? What am I going to do when I get older? And all of a sudden, all these obvious life questions and responsibilities that most people think about very early, I felt like that was when I kind of, the world of adulthood opened up. And it really was like a shift where I've felt a lot more of that anxiety and that pressure on life and what you're doing with your life, and whether it's legacy or whatever it is. So it has been, I really said to that point, it was like this protracted childhood, and not that I lead the most mature life now, but it was at that point I felt like there was that shift where all of a sudden now at night you do worry about what's going to happen and what if things go wrong. That the fears came in.
Yeah, and as we're talking through this, Matt, I mean, there's a lot of positivity in here, and you talk about not really dealing with your confronting fears or anxieties till you turn 39, but I know that you've been very public about your history with health challenges throughout your life. So it wasn't all easy sailing for you.
Yeah. No, yeah, I guess I did kind of sail over that. Yeah, and PJ was there so I have rheumatoid arthritis. I was diagnosed in 2002. But it was the 18 months leading up to it where I did that. And that was something where I did physically, and you're right, mentally, I think that was when I lost my body, right? Until then, I'd been young and healthy. I'd played sports. We were working out all the time. And over 18 months, I started having pain in my right index finger. And then it spread to my feet, to my neck, to my back. The pain was getting so bad. I would sleep with like a whiplash collar, like one of those My Cousin Vinny things on my neck. I stopped working out altogether for the first time in my life. I was exhausted to the point where I would sleep, 9, 10, 11 hours a day and still feel spent. And I probably was depressed, even if I didn't realize it. But the thing that kept me going was being able to do comedy, was being able to get out, because I will say this to this day, I don't care how tired I am or if I'm sick. I don't care if I'm stressed. Once I get on stage, the second I grab that mic and look at the crowd, it goes away, because you become present. Mm-hmm. The thing I love about comedy is I don't know anything else that I've done that forces you to be so present. Because as comedians, we know if you're not present, the crowd's going to sense it. You're going to bomb. You can recite things. Eventually, it will catch up to you. But there's just something that I love about comedy, to be in that moment and to have your mind. It's like it expands. I always think of it when they talked about Michael Jordan. When he was in the zone, the hoop would be 7 feet across. You couldn't miss. And it's that same feeling when you're on stage and your jokes are working and this next one's good, and you see everything slowing down like Neo in the Matrix. And it's such a good feeling when you get off. There's just this euphoric high. Mm-hmm. And when I was sick, when my body was falling apart, to be around PJ and Michael and to be able to go out and perform. And even if it wasn't performing, we would go to Denny's and we would laugh. We always were laughing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why, so, it really, I was lucky enough that I started treatment and physically I made a big recovery, but it was one of those things that I think changed how I looked at things. It gave me a new appreciation for comedy, but also for kind of why I've become active, why I initially really became active with the Arthritis Foundation was when I was diagnosed, I would go to these Arthritis Foundation meetings and see people who didn't respond to therapy or did, but the medicine had come too late, and seeing how ravaged they were, and just seeing how I think having been a doctor, I never appreciated until I ended up on the other side of the stethoscope that we focus so much on the physical and not the mental. And living through losing that physical ability to see the mental strain that it took and how much when I started to come out of it, how much the mental element coming back improved my physical well-being. I think I wanted to share my story because when I was diagnosed, there weren't, especially young men, there weren't young men with rheumatoid arthritis who would share their stories or that were as readily accessible. The internet was still in its infancy back then, relatively speaking. And I wanted to say, I said, I don't want people who are newly diagnosed to constantly see the worst case scenarios because, when you look up on a textbook, they don't show people who are well, they show the sickest people, and that's scary. And I thought, hey, I want people to see someone who seems young and vibrant, who you wouldn't know has an illness, and who's being out there and hopefully, having a full career. So they say, hey, rheumatoid arthritis doesn't mean that it's the end of something. I can still lead this full life. And so I think when I saw that and then saw, how people who were newly diagnosed would reach out to me, and it was gratifying again, having left medicine, to kind of feel like, hey, this is a way to still help people to be able to combine that through sharing my story, through trying to use humor specifically to share my story.
There's something in that, and MPJ, I just want to touch on this because you put something together in my head that I don't think I ever had, and it's like
that's what this is for.
This is just Sam's therapy.
And I'm working this out as we're talking, so we'll see. But is it this? Yeah, this is we've actually discussed this. It's hard to access, but there's this internal external dynamic around comedy and humor, and coming from a place where you're doing it for yourself and coming from a place when you're doing it for others. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it become unhealthy when it's unbalanced, when you're just doing humor for other people, mm-hmm. and like you've lost why you're doing it for yourself. And I've seen it unhealthy when it's overly selfish and it's like, I'm doing comedy, fuck what these people think. Right. And it seems like in your experience, just as you've described it, there was this piece of like, I did comedy and use humor to get on stage to be present. And this was like something for me in this time. And comedy was a way that I can tell my story so I can like make other people feel less alone. And like that to me seems like a really positive formula for the way like comedy and humor can play a good role in people's lives.
Yeah. And I think you see that. PJ and I talk about this all the time when you kind of try to look at the successful comedians. And the ones I think who do it the best are the ones who've really tapped into something authentic with themselves. And the other thing we see is inevitably when someone would rise, you'd see people starting to clone them. And, whether it was Larry the Cable Guy or Dane Cook or Foxworthy or Chris Rock, how inevitably you would see people adapting their cadence. You'd see people adapting their tone and that subject matter. Doug Stanhope is another one where you see these comedians, people all of a sudden start to draw that element out of them. And it is an inescapable part of your growth as a comedian, is drawing from those you love. And my favorite comedian is Brian Regan. Brian Regan's a guy, once you hear him talk, you can't stop. And it's one of those things where you see people, though, and you've seen people have success emulating somebody else, but I think there's always a cap to it, or when they get there, the only way they sustain it is by eventually figuring out, all right, this has gotten me here, but the way I sustain it is figuring out what is really me. And that's, again, I am by no means saying I have that figured out. I think that is, that is the biggest challenge with comedy is a lot of my jokes, I think that I tell, some of them I've outgrown them. They are from a previous version of me, but I just, sometimes they still work and you tell them. And it is that thing of, and PJ and I were talking about it because I think it when, and every comedian will experience this, when you listen to your material and you think, oh my God, I'm going to smash my phone if I have to listen to another second of my own voice. And yet I was telling PJ, so I did this set and I was like, I'm yelling, I'm selling it. I'm not being sincere until the very end when I started talking about Apprentice and Arnold Schwarzenegger, because it was so authentic of how I really felt. I heard my voice, I dropped down into it, and I was just talking. And I was like such a cue of, because I didn't believe the other stuff, I was having to put this bullshit on top of it to sell it. And again, it's, at one point I did believe it, and there were ways to discover it. And that's another thing PJ and I talk about. God, we had such a good time right around before he got married. We did a week at the Virginia Beach Funny Bone, and we just talked comedy the way we used to. And one of the things we were saying is we were writing things that were funny, and we just kept asking, wait a second, why was this funny in the first place? What initially made me tell this? Because you see that where sometimes you get something and then something pops in that's clever, but kind of gets you away from that. And all of a sudden you're developing that. And this joke becomes something where I'm saying this because it's getting a reaction, but it got away from why it was initially funny. And when you watch the really good comedians, man, you just feel that. And Chappelle is somebody who just, and Bill Burr too, I think, where they have this clear point of view that you feel with everything. And sometimes the laughs aren't even that it's funny, it's that it's so honest, and the recognition that it's just, it's undeniable, which I know PJ always, you got to be undeniable.
Well, and I think the thing, Matt, and in your defense, there's a couple of, you're very busy. You know what I mean? It's not like you're out there on the stage every single night and you're like, oh, these things aren't being put together. I mean, you have a lot of shows you host. you have like if anybody, I should be huge. Like, put it on me. I'm the one out there doing stand up all the time. Nobody knows.
I will say though, what did I say the last time we did it? I was like, man, your jokes you're performing. Your jokes had gotten to the next level. Where it is that thing of, yeah, because you were putting the time in. You were sitting on the ships. You were writing your material. You were listening. You were honing it. You weren't settling for this got to laugh. You were always like, where's the bigger laugh? Where's the next thing?
And I think that's where where friendship and appreciation comes in. And then actually the work that we both get to do with Sam with the Armsters Art Partnership, because we get to see the young excitement of new comedy. Because when you do get to where we are, you learn some tricks. You learn how to make something funny to the audience, but not funny to you. And I didn't want to brush over a big part of your journey, Matt, especially with RA, which was it's not like you got diagnosed right away. So yeah. I think a big part of comedy for you, it was a life preserver, because it took about 1.5 years before you even, and I didn't even know even testing your body doesn't cooperate. And it could take that long. So on top of, for me, I know comedy has been a life preserver for me a lot of times during my life. And I could, during that time, as you voiced it, I think everybody needs to know that it was 1.5 years of you trying to figure this out.
And you're right. I was going to rheumatologists. They were testing me for RA, and the tests were coming back negative. And eventually it was an X-ray where I'd had X-rays a few months before. They got another set, and the guy puts the X-ray up, and he goes, how long have you had rheumatoid arthritis? I said, I don't. They tested me, and he goes, you have rheumatoid arthritis. This is classic RA. He goes, go get tested. I'm like, all right. And I got tested, and I was everything had converted. But again, what a lesson as a doctor, where I saw this, where we tested for it, so we stopped considering that. And you see that is such, I've seen that with other people I know with health struggles, some loved ones, where someone got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, which is one of the easiest diagnoses to make, but they'd missed it for probably 5 years because they tested for it, hadn't come back positive, and they just had ruled it out. And, it's a lesson where I think one of the things I learned was to listen to your body, to trust when you feel something's wrong, when you know something's wrong. Just if someone tells you there's nothing wrong with you, you don't always have to accept that when you know deep down something is. And I think it is that thing of trusting, trusting yourself, which is hard to do. And then finding, eventually I found doctors who were partners, who really were collaborative, which has been key.
What I also think is interesting is now you got the diagnosis. You have rheumatoid arthritis. Now here's the answer. This is where I'm going. I got to live with this for the rest of my life. And one point that always sticks out to me is it actually helped diagnose cancer for you.
Yeah. There's another health thing, I guess. So yeah, when I was like, life was great, I was 39.
But but the thing, Manno, is here's this thing that you struggled with in a way that saved your life.
Rheumatoid arthritis saved my life from cancer. So yeah, I 2007. I'm living with rheumatoid arthritis, and medicine I'm on, the way you treat it is it's an autoimmune disease. My immune system is attacking my own body. So the treatment down regulates my immune system, which leaves you susceptible to infection. Right now, this is not a great time to have it, but fortunately it doesn't look bad. But so I was having some pain in my chest, and I thought probably nothing, but it could be an infection. And because of my immune system, it could be suppressed. This could be spreading. I should get it checked out. I go see a doctor who gets a chest x-ray. He's like, your lungs are fine. But he was really thorough, and he talked to me, and he realized I'd flown recently. He said, when you fly, you're at risk for clots, and it could be a clot in your lung. I just want to rule it out. I want to get a CAT scan. So he sends me to the emergency room. This was a Friday night at like 6 p.m. and emergency rooms are very busy Friday nights at 6 p.m. And I wasn't an urgent case. So I ended up waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And it wasn't until finally like 1 a.m, they're like, all right, we'll get you in for this CAT scan. And 30 minutes later, the doctor comes in and he says, you're fine, go home. The next morning, Saturday morning at like 9 a.m., I get a call, and it's the radiologist. So it was just an emergency room doctor who read it, who looked at the lungs. He said, it's fine. The radiologist looked at the whole scan, and he said, on the bottom of the scan, there's a solid mass in your kidney. There's an 85% chance this is malignant. You have to get it checked out as soon as possible. And then he said, have a nice day. I thought, not now, pal. Not now. And sure enough, I go to the doctor. I get it checked out. I had to have surgery to remove it. And it wasn't until they had to do the pathology on the tumor, they took it out. And it was 5 days after the surgery. So now it's been about a month, 5 weeks where I've been told maybe you have cancer. And the doctor comes in. He said, it was malignant. You have cancer. But we think we got it all. There's a 95% chance you're cured. So go live your life. And so it was weird where and he said, we got it early because of this CAT scan. The pain I was having in my chest, completely unrelated. It was just me being a wuss. This tumor was asymptomatic. He's like, this would have spread, and it would have presented when it had metastasized. And at that point, your survival rate goes below 50%. So you catching this early saved your life. And the only reason I caught it was that rheumatoid arthritis. So rheumatoid arthritis saved me from cancer. And it was, it's weird because I'm like, I'm a cancer survivor, but I didn't find out I had cancer until in the very same breath, I find out I'm also likely cured. So it was, again, when I look at people who go through cancer, where they're going through multiple rounds of radiation and chemotherapy and their body being ravaged by it, I was very fortunate in this to have this surgery and then essentially be free from cancer. And it was a 10-year period where I was getting CAT scans and they were checking to make sure, but it's now past where they say my risk is back down to zero.
Well, hearing you say that then brings me back to so I kind of get why you're saying, up until I was 39, things were fine, because there's like two ways you could view the world. Like there's people who view the world and they're like, fuck, I got I got rheumatoid arthritis, and on top of that, I had fucking cancer. And like, they're complaining about all of those things. Or there's people who are like, this rheumatoid arthritis is what saved my life from cancer. And you're that latter group of people.
Well, it is funny. I think, when the RA was hitting, when the symptoms were bad for those 18 months, it did get bad. And in hindsight, I probably was, whether it's clinically depressed or not, it was impacting me. But when I got back on when they diagnosed it and I got on treatment, it was as though it was lifted. And so it's funny where those are real things to be worried about. Cancer and rheumatoid arthritis. Those don't really keep me up at night. It is the fears of these intangible things that are likely not even likely to happen, where I found that I call it just ruminating, where you're just ruminating on things going, why am I even worrying about this? And so I think it's been an interesting challenge as I've tried to grow up to start to analyze, like, what am I thinking? Why am I thinking it? How do I change this? An ongoing process. That honestly, and I will say, I'm sorry, I would say a quarantine, this has been, I'm, finding the silver linings in this. Obviously, this is not what we wanted to have happen, but this has been a forced time to slow down that I don't know that I would have taken otherwise, where I was traveling. I was going to New York every week, and I was traveling for shows, and I wasn't home for more than probably 3 days in 7 months. And I wasn't taking care of myself physically or emotionally, I think. And it was catching up. I wasn't feeling good. And this slowing down, this quarantine has forced me to really reevaluate my life. And I think, when we're trying to find the silver linings, I think this is an opportunity I know I'd never would have taken for myself and never really had before. And I think to reevaluate how you're living your life and how you're caring for yourself. And for me, I know I spent the first week plus of quarantine in my bed playing Assassin's Creed, ordering takeout, and just going, what am I doing? And eventually I had to unplug my PlayStation and go, what are you doing? And I've started cooking, and it's just been this thing of these obvious things. I'm obviously, I think these are things that most people have come to in their lives already. But for me, this opportunity to slow down and to say, how am I living my life? How can I live it a little more intentionally? Or how can I try to choose these things? I guess despite feeling like I'd been very successful, a lot of it had happened by saying yes to everything and just feeling like I'm in a ship and I'm at sea and I'm just along for a ride and I don't know where it's going. So far, it's worked out pretty well. And it had been a growing sense of dis-ease over that over the past few years that quarantine has kind of allowed me to evaluate and say, I didn't like that. I didn't like that feeling of, even though it was working out, this sense of, I guess the reason I felt the anxiety was because I wasn't consciously choosing things, because I wasn't really being intentional with it. I guess that's why I felt like the winds could easily shift and all of a sudden I'd be in a direction I didn't want to be. And not to say that you insulate yourself from these changes, from losing jobs, but this idea more of, I know where I want to go and I'm going to move in that direction regardless of what's happening. I think that is one of these epiphanies that I hope sticks with me after this, that has been something that is fundamentally, I feel like, changing for me. That has been a big epiphany that I think started 10 years ago when I woke up going, oh my God, I'm going to die soon, to now, oh, this is what growing up is kind of this, finding that North Star, finding that beacon in life that's drawing you forward and saying, I'm going to move towards that and try to put my life in alignment with that in all the ways, instead of saying, whatever happens, I'll just try to make the best of it. And it's not a huge shift, I think, necessarily in how you're living your day-to-day life, but I think of how you think about things and approach things. For me, it has been a big shift. And again, I for sure for most people, everyone's going, yeah, we figured that out in high school, bro. I'm a little slow to things.
But that's comedy. That's a comedian. That's an entertainer.
Oh, it is. And it very much is an immature, and that's, I think, one of the risks of this profession is, Sam, I think what you were saying where, what do you focus on? Focus on the crowd. You focus on yourself. This is a self-centered career because of, we've seen now everyone's job, the security is a bit of an illusion, but for comedy and for TV, you're living week to week with ratings. I think there is an uncertainty that you kind of accept, but really trying, I think, to not let that dominate how you view your life or your self-worth or your validation. But to say, hey, regardless of what happens, I'm still going to keep moving forward in this way and believing that you will get, whether American Ninja Warrior gets canceled or whatever, like, hey, I'll be okay because I'm still going to keep moving forward in that direction and figure out a way to make things work.
Since you bring up Ninja Warrior, there's something about the perseverance that you had throughout it, because it's not like, oh, I got American Ninja Warrior. That was the first thing I got. Man, you have a laundry list.
You mean these shows behind me that are all gone away?
Yeah, for people who are listening, Matt's got a poster of all the shows that are...
Screenplay and Clean. The Apprentice, which was a prime example of something where I'm the new Celebrity Apprentice, or as many people say, the last Celebrity Apprentice, because the show was canceled after me. I was just talking to somebody where I think the point of medicine is a safe career. It would have been probably an easy decision to stay in it and say, I'm betting that if I'm a doctor, I'll be safe. I'll be secure. I'll have a job. My life will work out fine. And I think when you choose entertainment, what you're doing is you're betting on not the career. You're not betting on the shows or anything. You're betting on yourself. You're betting that I will find a way. I believe I'll work hard enough. I believe I have enough talent that I'll find a way to make a living. It may not be $20 million a picture. It may not be, limousines, but it'll be doing something I love, and I'll figure out a way to make it work. And I think in life, that's one of the things that I've really been glad is that I've chosen this career where you get to bet on yourself, because I see people who've chosen careers in finance or law or whatever who don't love what they do. And they feel trapped, and their career has become, it is a job. It is where they go there. I remember that is it Loverboy? Everybody's working for the weekend. And, that's what it is, a job. But to have something where I love what I do. I love hosting American Ninja Warrior Live Rescue. I love doing stand-up. I love talking to groups. I love that. It's not the job is the stress when you don't have a job. It's getting the job. But it's such a good feeling to love what you do, and to have been fortunate enough to have a life where I get to do that is, I think that's been like awesome.
Well, it's interesting to me hearing this, because the only way you would have gotten to the place you did is by saying yes, right? Like, you're saying yes. You're saying yes. You're saying, Celebrity Apprentice, they need someone for the show. You say yes. Like, you're making sure that whenever there's an open door, you're taking advantage of it.
Yes.
And now you're at a point where you can start to say no. And so it seems like this has been a pause for you, because you're almost taking stock of.
Yeah. I that has been one of the advice that I've given people is say yes to everything. And I think I have a small caveat for that now, but it is still something where, look, nothing will happen sitting on your couch waiting for people to discover you. No matter how talented you are, there are a lot of people just as talented who are working their asses off to make things happen. And what I found is, all these shows are canceled, but the very first show I had, Screenplay, in 2004, it lasted one season, but it led to a home makeover show, Clean House, that I did for 5.5 years. And that helped me buy my house. And I won an Emmy for that. And that led to Sports Soup, which only lasted 2 seasons, but that got me American Ninja Warrior, which is the job I have today. So that job in 2004, even though it lasted 1 season and was critically panned by everybody except PJ was kind and my mom, it got me all these other jobs. And a lot of it was, going in and getting to know the casting directors then too. And I've been very much someone who I'm excited to work and I'm excited to show up for an opportunity. I'm excited to do someone's podcast because you don't know what can happen from it. You don't know who's watching. You don't know who they can become. And even if nothing does, it's still doing what you love. It's still getting you closer, getting you better at what you do, giving you practice, giving you those reps. Now, I am at the point now where I still want to say yes to everything, but I am also saying, how do you value your time? How do you say no to some things so you can say yes to the right things? Mm-hmm. And, I think I'm trying to be more selective in things. And if I am saying yes to something, if I'm like, well, then find a reason to say yes to it. If you can't, then say no. But the amount of times where, a meeting 5 years ago, whatever it is, all of a sudden somebody calls and goes, nothing happened. Nothing. I didn't have anything, but now you popped into my head. And so I think that there is, and that's the other thing is being gracious when you're fired, being gracious when things end, because everything ends. Everything goes away, but you may have an opportunity to work again with those people.
And that's inherently a humor-based mindset, right? The basis of improv is yes and, right? Like accepting and bringing it in. The basis of comedy is being like opening yourself up to every different angle you can explore a joke, every different possible audience. Like there is this openness and acceptance that is inherent in the art forms and in the professions that you've chosen. That is, I think almost become now a part of how you guys have adapted and
and I think your yes becomes more powerful and better when you really start to figure out what it is you want and where you're headed, and being able to say, I'm going to say yes to this because of this. I think it, and if you're saying no, to say, I'm not just, this is why I'm saying no to, for whatever reason. So I think there is something of being open to that possibility and not even necessarily, expecting something from it, but being open to it, and being patient enough to say, it may not be today, tomorrow, or even in a few years. It could take a long time. But if you're in this for the long haul, and realizing this is a marathon, not a sprint.
The one thing that I do want to point out, and this is a little bit of inside baseball, because I've watched Matt's career. We've been friends. I've had the phone calls. But the thing that I think was Matt's finest showcase of not only the performer, his intellect and his heart was when he won the Celebrity Apprentice. Because the night before he was going, we went out to dinner. He was talking about it. Matt was nervous, but he did all his due diligence. He read Arnold Schwarzenegger was the host. He read Arnold Schwarzenegger's book. He watched all the Celebrity Apprentice. He went in with a game plan. But the thing that really pushed him over, as you were watching it was his offstage life experience. Like for me, the struggle with RA, all those years of that combined with what Ninja Warrior gave him, combined with his relationships, combined with the talent that he nurtured over the years, all came together. And it just put him above. It really put him above everyone else, because everyone else had a charity. Everyone else is like, oh, I'm doing this or that. But it wasn't in their, lack of a better word, in their bones like it was in Matt's. Like Matt was just, he knew he was there, and he knew that his winning was bigger than himself.
It was stressful, and again, in entertainment, I'm a host. I don't risk anything. On Ninja Warrior, PJ's been on the course, and he put more of himself out there in his 3 runs than I have in over 10 years. I don't risk anything. If I really screw up, we can always pick it up again. And it's been such a different experience. It was such a different experience doing Celebrity Apprentice, where all of a sudden I'm the one being judged. And there was a part of me that loved it because, I love a challenge. But it was just what I think you said, PJ. For me, what I loved was it did feel like it called on everything I'd done, from the discipline of medicine, from sports, the lessons of sports and being a teammate, from hosting and being able to work a crowd, to stand-up comedy, to being funny, from pop culture knowledge. It was so much fun to feel like I was being challenged. Like you're this horse who's been pent up. It's like, all right, go stretch your legs, see what you can do. And I think the other thing that was nice was to feel like Arnold Schwarzenegger was someone who really rewarded taking a risk and putting yourself out there with performance. And, I did lip sync battle, and then I just did RuPaul's Celebrity Drag Race. And the thing is, I will go for something. I don't mind looking like a jackass. I would rather go all in than do something half-assed. And Schwarzenegger, I think, really nurtured that and appreciated it. And it's been for me so much fun to go on and RuPaul. So it just aired. And when we did it, it was an amazing experience. But seeing people's response to, I think, me being able to go in there and just the willingness to say, I will go full drag, I'll do Celine Dion, I'll do it all. It was unbelievably gratifying to hear people. And Ross Matthews said something so lovely on the show where he said, Matt, you look like every bully who used to torment me every day in high school. And to see you up here embracing it, it has been an amazing experience. And I thought, wow, for me to get to dress up as a woman and get to feel that and to hear this from people was an awesome experience. And I think it's this, to have the willingness to try something, to embrace, another life, another skin, whatever it is, to try that and to throw yourself into it, which I think is what comedy is to a certain extent. Is when you're really doing stand-up comedy, you're naked up there, because if people aren't laughing, it's not that they may not find your jokes funny. You feel like they don't find you funny. And I think that ability to have been on stage and to peel it down, and the more you strip it down, and to stop putting all the little bells and whistles on it that keep you safe, but to just say, this is me. And I think I'm better doing it in drag than I am in stand-up comedy. But I think that's, it was another reminder of the power of, really trying to inhabit your skin. And sometimes you do that by trying other things on.
You continue to have a growth mindset. And there's so many people our age that just stop. They're like, oh, I have all the answers. And when you do something like that, like you just mentioned what Ross had to say, is not only are you successful like on IMDb, but there are all these amazing moments. Like you and I share this, and we look at our lives and we go, we're so rich in these amazing moments.
Yeah.
And people can't take those from you.
Yeah.
There's no value on it. And just when you were talking about what Ross had to say, I'm like, that is again, it's just part of that growth,
You've had this breadth of experience. I'm wondering, are there any specific stories from these times that like you really go back on, like just a richness that you return to?
Yeah. It's I started talking about this on stage. I call them 80s movie moments. I felt like every great 80s movie would have one of those moments where you wanted to stand on your chair. And I always talk about Rudy, which is technically in the 90s. But when, the groundskeeper has to give him that talk about he wanted to quit. And he's like, you're 5'0" nothing, 100 nothing, and you held it with the best players in the land, and you're walking out of here with an education. In this life, you got to prove nothing to nobody except yourself. And I just I love those moments in movies. And like doing comedy, you don't risk anything as much. I always joke, but I think when you have a moment, and I think for me, and PJ was so good about this, because I was bemoaning, we shot Apprentice well before the election had happened, and NBC was presenting this show to be huge. And I knew at that point, I didn't know I'd won, but I knew I was final two. And I'm like, this is going to be a great showcase. I think people are going to see me in a different light. And I thought this could really change my career. And then it gets so politicized, they burn off the episodes and nobody watches it. And I was kind of bummed, and I was complaining about it. And PJ once said, "You're friends with Arnold Schwarzenegger. What more would you have wanted?" And I just thought, yeah, to get to when I grew up, he's still on the Predator poster has been on my bedroom wall since my sophomore year of high school. Like, I grew up with him on my walls, and now through this ridiculous career, I've gotten to become friends with him. I've gotten to work with him and travel with him, and to learn from him and talk about an unbelievably impressive and inspiring guy where, when you surround yourself with people, if you have a chance to be around people like that, people who just have this shining light, this vision, this unshakable confidence, and this unstoppable vision. When you're around them, it inspires you and elevates you. And I'm like, I think that's why PJ Bats and I also, we always clicked, is comedy can be a negative place. But the three of us were always positive. We liked our lives. We loved our families. And we didn't want to pretend to be anything else. And to find people, I think, who share those values or that vision with you and surround yourself with them, that elevates you rather than dragging you down. So, if I think of moments, Apprentice has been certainly one of the biggest ones, and to still have become to have stayed friends with him. And I think, it's also been with the Arthritis Foundation. I got to go to a summer camp with these kids. And I remember some of them coming up to me and saying, I have arthritis just like you. I want to be a ninja someday. And just thinking, wow, I'm not a doctor. I'm not saving lives, but you see how you can still, in the most ridiculous ways, doing this most ridiculous profession, you can still have an impact on people's lives. With your comedy, you can still brighten up somebody's day. You can change their point of view on something. And
when he won the Celebrity Apprentice, we went to Phoenix.
Yeah.
And I was playing a comedy club, and Bats and I went out there just to join him for the weekend. And the Final Four was going on. And Matt's like, this is a bucket list thing. We got to do this. We all got to go to Final Four. And this is something Matt will always do. Before we even say anything, Matt's like, I got tickets. So Matt, Michael, and I we're watching the Final Four, and we got last minute tickets up in the stands. But Matt is getting stopped everywhere. Like, Matt, we'd go around, and every once in a while people are like, Ninja Warrior, this, that. But this was a completely different level. Like, I felt like I was walking with Larry the Cable Guy. Like, that kind of, like, everyone was stopping. And Matt's loving it. Like, this is like, he's like, yeah. So we're all the way up there watching the game. One guy comes up, and
you got to make clear where we are. We're in a football stadium. We're at the university, the Phoenix, where the Cardinals play. We are in the upper deck in one of the last rows. I mean, we are like a mile from the basketball court in this stadium.
I burnt my hat in one of the lights. So we're up there, and this guy comes up. He lugs all the way up to the top, and he goes, Matt Iseman. He goes, man, you were great on the Celebrity Apprentice. I'm a huge fan of Ninja Warrior. Do you mind if I get take a picture? Oh, no problem. And I think I even took the picture. I'm like, because no problem. We take the picture, and then he looks at Matt, and he looks all the way down. He goes, what are you doing sitting all the way up here? And dude, that's the greatest part about having friends, because Matt just turns and he looks at us, and we all just died.
There it is. Life will bring you down. Life will remind you. Humble you.
Yeah, but that's that's the comedy part. That's the comedy part. And something that Sam and I were doing when we were talking about discussing leading up to this episode. It is amazing to me, again, to revisit the struggle you had with RA. Mm-hmm. You go through this Celebrity Apprentice. Not only did it, show that you had cancer at that point, but then it actually ended up leading you to meet your hero.
Yeah.
This is called In Stitches.
Yeah.
Here is something that cut you, repairs, and then there's the other side. And you're an example of that.
It is funny, Peach, because I've been thinking about that, where we all have our scars, whether they're visible or not. And we carry them in life. And it is one of those things of, instead of hiding them, there is a certain amount of, man, you really gotta own them. You got to embrace them, because they're a part of you. And it is one of those things when you're truly okay with them, I think it is this liberating feeling. It is like that thing of being on stage, like, man, bring it on. I am ready for whatever. And it's, again, it is this ongoing journey, but it's great. I love being able to have an opportunity like this. And, with the Armed Services Arts Partnership, it's been unbelievable seeing people who have faced real serious adversity and who are coming back and who really are using comedy for good. And the opportunity, PJ, and that Sam, you set up for us, where we've sat down in writing sessions, and we've been on shows with them. We've gotten to do online performances with them. And to see, I think, the joy, to see the joy that comedy brings them, and to know how crucial that joy, how that for them, this could be the first light they've seen in, since becoming a soldier, since coming back. And it really is awesome to I think see the power of comedy, and why I think, what I love about this podcast is hey, you're talking about really heavy subjects, but we're not afraid to laugh about it. And I think, that's one of the things whenever I tell my stories, I want people to laugh about it because I'm okay with it. I'm okay with having rheumatoid arthritis. I'm okay with having cancer. People take their cues from you. And if you can laugh about it, then people are like, oh, then I guess I can be okay with it too.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great place. We can go to our closing question.
Oh, here it is.
Oh no, it's a big one. I mean, you've talked a little bit about, you've had this experience where you're thinking about, what is my role in the world? What is my legacy? So how do you want to be remembered, Matt Iseman?
Oh boy. I feel like I should have an answer for this. I don't, the thing that popped into my head is like, he's a great friend. I think that is, to me, one of the joys in my life has been people. God, my brother actually said something beautiful about this. There was someone I had asked him, and I have a joke where I've been, and it's true, I've been to probably now close to or over 100 weddings. And my brother said, Matt's always the best man at a wedding, even if he's not the best man. And I just thought, man, that's a nice thing to say, because but it is that thing of I want to bring joy to people's lives. I think that's why I went into medicine, and turned out that wasn't the way to do it. But I think that's one of the things I love with comedy is, and whenever I'm doing a show, whether it's Ninja Warrior or something, I always want it to feel like I'm throwing a party, and I want everybody to feel welcome, and I want everybody to have a blast. And I hope, I think that's what I would love for people to remember about me is, man, I want them to feel like I'm their friend. I want them to feel like, man, this guy is a great friend. And, for people who are my friends in life, like PJ and Michael, and, I always want to, I've gotten so much out of the friendships in my life that for me, it's, the toughest thing with quarantine has been not being able to physically be around my friends. And so I always want them to feel how much I appreciate having them in my life, and that if it weren't for them, then what's the point of all of this, right? What's the point if you don't have people in your life? And, hopefully I'll have a family of my own someday. But in the meantime, I feel like my friends are my family. So I think it would be remembered as a great friend. And funny, a funny friend, hopefully.
Well, and I'll back that up because you were one of the best men at my wedding. Which, and one of the reasons I did pick him is Matt is big about saying yes to everything. So I made sure he talked to my wife before we even did the vows. Listen to what Matt has to say. And as far as being a friend, and just so everyone knows, there's not a better guy. There isn't. Actually, on my pillow, it says, you're friends with Matt Iseman. What else do you want?
Elena loves that.
Yeah. I actually have a cardboard cutout.
I had a cardboard cutout of myself in my house. So that's that.
But to back that up, back up what you said, Matt, and you will be remembered by that, because after my wedding, that's when Sam got to really, really talk to you. And Sam sent me a message that said, you are surrounded by the best people.
Yeah.
And
your wedding was one of the best I've ever been to because of that, where I felt every single person who was there, you wanted to be there and they wanted to be there. And it felt like people I'd never met. I was like, you're my friend, Meebo, like you're guys. I'm like, yeah, I'd have been friends with these guys. Like that. And that's, I think which is the more you get in life, man, those are the moments to be around friends like that, to have moments like that. Those are the moments that stand out. And it's like, I want more of those.
We'll get back to it.
I got to get married or something. Have a party.
Matt Iseman, thank you so much for joining in Stitches.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, guys.
Love you, Matt. See ya. What do you think your big takeaway was?
I was very happy that what his final answer. I was very happy that he wants to be remembered as a really good friend, because that's how I look at him. And I think that's, you take away the lights and the cameras and everything. I mean, without your friends and family, what is there?
For me, the thing that stuck with me was that middle part where he was talking a lot about like comedy during rheumatoid arthritis started as it was for him. Like, I'm doing this for me. And it evolved over time into this is for me and it's for other people. And like, he seems to have a very healthy approach to comedy and to approach his like kind of his relationship to humor is it's both generative for him on a personal level and it's something that allows him to build relationships to give back and serve to bring joy to people. And I love that he has that balance on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. I mean, if there's anybody that has it.
All right, well, that wraps up another episode of In Stitches.
Another successful episode, Sam. A lot of people to thank.
A lot of people to thank. First and foremost, Dr. Matt Iseman for being really open with us. And also for our amazing executive producer, David Bobrow, for seeing every episode through from planning to execution to putting it together. So very grateful for you.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. Do us a favor. Please follow us on all the In Stitches social media platforms and go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review and a comment. Because if you do that, you can help us get to the new and newsworthy podcast section. And if we get there, Sam, like people are going to learn more. They're going to hear more great stories, more of these awesome guests we have. And do us a favor. If you know someone who you think would be a great guest for the In Stitches podcast, please reach out to us and let us know.
Boom. Well, that's another episode of In Stitches, PJ.
Yep. Another one in the books or in the podcast or in the earphones. This has been In Stitches.